luxury of self-destruction to be self-aware. Why my mind malfunctions into disreverse? I walk to get a drink from the machine. Why my mind malfunctions? The luxury of self-destruction to be self-aware.
Hello everybody, my name is Conor James Doyle and welcome to my class in collaboration with 11 Australia. So a little bit about me, if you don't know who I am a colorist and an educator. I specialise in education that is inspired by neurodiversity. So what that means is I like my education to be quick, effective, and most importantly, super useful. So as you can see on my left, on my right, the camera's backwards, so I'm a bit unsure. I'm going to be showing you how to create a sort of custom copper look that has a little bit of dimension and has a little bit of kind of different depth and tone to it, but how to do it in a really quick, effective way. The reason that I chose this type of color is because, for one, it's quite current at the minute. We're seeing a lot of people delve into these kind of deep, reddy coppers, these kind of auburn tones, these more vibrant tones, but also it's something that clients can do very easily themselves at home, and we want to show that we can do more. Hello, Melvin. There is a chat box, by the way, as well, and comments and stuff. So by all means, people, if you want to fire in comments, ask any questions, please do. The comments and stuff will be watched afterwards. This video is going to be on YouTube too, so you'll be able to kind of interact with us. So with these type of colors, as I was saying, they remind me a lot of when I was in school, because a lot of the times people will be able to just pick up a box color and do this themselves at home. So our job as hairdressers is to show them a more expensive way and show them that the money that they pay comes out with a different result. So what I want you to notice within this, there is obvious different tones in it. It's not major high contrast. It's not like what we were looking at over the last couple of years where it was like super intense dimension, but there's enough kind of subtle shade and depth and lightness in there that would distinguish it as a professional color and would make a client feel that their money was worth spending. So what I want you to take away from this tutorial is how to do this in a really quick, effective way. So with this color, it's all done in one step. The final tone is just done by emulsification. We're only using two colors, well, three technically, but two bowls mixed up. We're using pre-lightener. We're applying it all at the same time, and you can take this technique and apply it to brunette, you can apply it to blonde, you can apply it to your balayage, because the main thing is I want this to be fast and effective. So another thing about me, I'm not a fast hairdresser. Anybody who has worked with me before, including Melvin and Martina, who just commented there, know that I am proudly slow as a hairdresser. So what I've learned to do is be fast and effective. So instead of, recognizing it takes me a million years to do a lot of foils, I start to think, how can I do this in a slightly quicker way? How can I do this maybe in one extra step missing, but still get the same results? So I've done 3/4 of the head because I'm slow, and to also show you the after. So again, take a little look there. Hopefully you can see it properly. It's a beautiful kind of, almost like a slight reddish copper, because we're going on top of a base 7 that would still have that kind of warmth in it, but you should be able to see that different tonality in there that distinguishes it as an expensive salon color. And then I've left a little segment here for us to color together. So the products that I'm using today is the 11 Australia permanent color. If you haven't used it, you need to try it out straight away. It is possibly one of the easiest and most versatile permanent colors I've ever worked with, mainly because it has that sort of fluidity to it. I'm hoping that's a word, and I'm hoping I said it correctly. So traditionally, I find permanent colors quite thick, quite heavy, and quite difficult to work with. These, because of the oils and because of how they're formulated, they blend really effortlessly with the hair. They also are really easy to kind of play and mix together. So we're going to be using the permanent color range. We're going to be using that with 20 volume. You can use it with 10 volume as well, depending on what your goal is. I will often use 10 volume on a client that maybe has no gray, that I almost want a slight semi-permanent type of result. Today we're going to use 20 volume because I want a bit more coverage, and also with doll's heads, they are unpredictable, so we don't want to take any chances. I'm also going to be using the powder lightning range. I'm going to be using the 6 levels and the 9 levels. So what a lot of people do not realize, and even like, it's kind of my smug little thing that I get to be like, you're actually allowed to do it, is when I mix 6 and 9 together on my videos, people are like horrified or alarmed or think I've broken every rule in the book. You can mix these together. So often with the 6 levels, it's this beautiful clay-like consistency. It's so easy to apply. It's so intuitive. But like every freehand lift, you can only get really so far with it. So when you add a little bit of 9 levels, so just like if you're imagining 30 grams maybe of your 6 levels, maybe like 5 to 10 grams your 9 levels will turn your 6 level clay, which is super easy to work into the hair and super kind of freehand. It gives it that extra boost. So I find that really good for darker hair. And the objective is I want to apply a darker root shade. I'll go through my formulations now in a minute. I want to apply a darker root shade into a slightly more vibrant shade in the ends. And I want to take out some sections and lighten them just slightly, almost like breaking the base a little bit. I could probably not have mixed in the 9 levels with the 6 levels, to be honest. You will get enough lift with it. But whenever I do a live, you do not want to take any chances. So if you've got a client that maybe has previous color in their hair and you want that freehand to have a bit more guaranteed boost, adding a small bit at that 9 really helps. But the 6 probably would have been fine. So what I want to do with that is almost add flecks that are slightly lighter throughout the hair, and then we'll rinse and we'll emulsify it all together so that what you'll have is the slightly darker root color, the slightly more vibrant, lighter end color that you can kind of see here, and then those lighter pieces that we will have lifted up. When we emulsify, that will all work together and it will give it a bit more of that multi-tonality. Again, this will work with any color range, any kind of, different bases that you're working with, anything like that you want to really boost that up. So first thing we're going to do, I just want to check, obsessed with the shine and health after the color service. Yes, you can already see. And I'll talk a little bit about what I use to style. And when oh my God, sunlight. We love sunlight. So you could definitely see it a little bit more there when I sit her into the sun. I often will do that with clients. When I'm finished doing their hair, I will walk them around to several points in the salon to be like, look at it, look at it. So the first formula that I'm mixing up is for the roots. So it is 5-4-3 and 6-4-3. No, 5-3-4 and 6-4-3. Thank you for the prompt down on screen. I'm a nightmare for color cards. Remembering colors, I'm just guided by my intuition and my ancestors usually when it comes to color. So I will be double, triple, quadruple checking that I'm using all the right formulations here. So I'm using a 5-3-4 and a 6-4-3. So a little tip when you're working with coppers especially, you really want to always add a little bit of that brown element into the root. It is very common, especially if your client has a natural bit of warmth already, or maybe they have some gray, or maybe they're a little bit lighter, for the roots of a copper to go quite warm in comparison to kind of your mid-lengths and ends. So I nearly always add a little bit of it. Let's say my target up here is a 6-4-3. I'll still add maybe a little bit of like a 6-3-4, or in this case 5-3-4, to pull it down slightly so that that root doesn't have that intense glow. It also grows out a little bit better. It is down to client preference. I usually find they do prefer this. If they want vibrancy the whole way up, that's not an issue. But more often than not, when I do this slightly more natural root, they prefer it. It grows out better and they don't get that guaranteed hot root. And organically, that little bit of brown and depth that you added in it as the hair grows down will fade. And every time that you refresh it, you're adding a bit more vibrancy. So it does tend to blend together a lot better. So we're going in. And what I want you to notice, this is different than if we were doing a classic root touch. So if we're doing, let's say this client has come back just to get the roots maintained, we're going to apply how you classically would. Super neat and kind of stopping exactly at the line. However, what I want you to do, and I'm just going to pop that up there. What I want you to do the first time you're doing any kind of color blend application is actually apply with a little bit more of a smudge, because it's going to be much easier to blend. And again, this color does have that kind of liquid sort of quality to it. So it's a lot easier to work, even for a permanent color. So I'm going to be working down the hair. And this is so unnatural. I don't know if anybody watching has ever, I know Melvin, you have, and Martina has as well. Coloring on camera is crazy because there is no world, I'll just pop that back up. There is no world where you would be coloring from the side and sort of like leaning to the left of a client, but this is what you have to do so you don't block the camera. So I'll just turn the phone a little bit like this. So if I'm not incredibly neat, it's because I quite literally can barely see what I'm doing, but hopefully you can. So what I want you to see there is that I'm not just applying it in that kind of straight block. I'm feathering it slightly. Hopefully you can see. So coming up to my last section here, a nice amount of product. This is not the time to be stingy with product, especially if this was a client's first time getting a color. Saturation is always key. And now we're going to start blending it down. So before I go in and pick my darker color or my more vibrant color, which I'll explain now in a second, I want to kind of comb that through a little bit. So I'm going to just slightly brush forward. So, and I talk about this in all of my classes, I personally avoid blending with combs like this. Hopefully you can see it. I know it's kind of blurring because they're too small. The risk that they'll tangle is super high. And if any color builds up in here, if you get a tangle, it will stop and you'll deposit that line into there. So I always use either quite a big kind of almost like a detangling brush, or I'm going to go in and use something that just is a little bit more wide tooth that I know isn't going to catch and also can't gather any product up here. I always like to blend forward as well, because what you'll do is you'll organically, if you can see here, from brushing forward, this product here has to travel a little bit further than this product here. So you'll get a slight bit of a teardrop shape. Think about how you do over direction and what's it called? Forward graduation. If you cut the hair like this, it will fall short to long. So I like to blend with my hands. And again, if you've used this product before, you'll know that it blends. Like, look how far down it travels. So that's why I'm using more of a wide tooth comb versus what I'd conventionally use, which would be a kind of detangling brush, because this product does really travel and it does really move when you spread it, which works to our advantage. So that's our first step done. So just as a little recap, if anybody who's just joined, we're taking this to this, which is a multi-tonal, I'll get some of that sunlight again, multi-tonal kind of vibrant copper in one step. So we're using 3 different colors. We're using a 534 and 643 on the root for a slight darker root. We're using a 744 and a 643 at the ends, and I'll get to that now in a second. And then we're adding some lightening sections in between. So now let's bring our other color through. This is where we're going to create our dimension as we go. Using my grips, keep everything out of the way. Often I'll place, if this was a real living human, I would often place foil. You know, if you're kind of flipping sections over, place foil on the other side so you can really eliminate any kind of transfer. One thing as well that I'm using, if you haven't gotten these 11 grips, they literally will hold your whole life together. I have never met a more reliable grip in my entire life. So we've now got our root color. We want to melt it into our ends, but we want to separate some hair that we then want to add some lightness into and come back later. So the color that I'm going to use for the ends is 643 and 744. I'm using about half 643 and then a quarter 744. So I'm not going full vibrancy with that because I want to make sure there's not too much of a disconnect, because if we're assuming most of this is natural hair or on the same base, if I go too light initially, there might be a disconnect unless there's a lot in common with these two tones. So this is my 543 or 534 and 643. And I'm now going to blend it into my 744 and 643. Before I do that, I'm going to weave out some fine sections of hair. Okay, something like this. So it's like a fine weave with quite a large gap. And what I want to do is I want to maybe section them to one side. So I'll maybe section them behind the head or anywhere that I can reach them later. And we're going to come back to them. This hair here, we're then going to apply our more vibrant shade. So where people panic is when they think, okay, I don't want these two colors to blend together. That is a panic that you need to put to bed. That is a panic that you need to get rid of. I promise you it will very rarely happen. The only time you might have issues is if you have like a base, I'm going to say like a 4 going into like a base 10. Something where there's like really high contrast, maybe for whatever reason you're doing vibrant pink or vibrant orange roots into like blonde ends, you might run into a small bit of trouble there. When you're blending colors that have only maybe 1 to 2 to even 3 levels apart, the likelihood that this is going to massively disrupt what's going on down here is very, very minimal. How you can make sure that that definitely doesn't happen is for, first of all, work the product into the hair. So when we first, the way I always explain it, color isn't a liquid, color is a solid. We turn it into a liquid via our color formulations, okay? So do you ever do a tint and then you come back just before you have to rinse it and it's gone quite hard, it's kind of encapsulated into the hair? It's very unlikely it's going to transfer. We can sort of fast track that by just grabbing, kind of clamping 2 fingers together and pushing the product in, almost like the opposite to how the hair grows, because you're pushing it into the cuticle, and it will make that product a lot more locked in and a lot harder to transfer down. So then we're going to get our end color and we're going to find that melting point. So this is where the 2 colors are going to meet. We're going to go above it because what we don't want is a hollow spot. We're going to feather slightly up and then we're going to saturate our color into the ends. And what I do want you to notice, and not to sound like a QVC sales guy, but seriously though, how easy it is to spread this color through the lengths and ends. I have worked with many permanent colors, and usually if somebody comes in for like a virgin application, it is hell on earth because you're mixing about 4,000 tubes up and getting it to spread, especially if their hair is quite dry or coarse. It's very difficult. This literally just glides through. We're going to get our white tooth comb or detangling brush, and we're going to brush it down again. So now you've got your darker, more natural root going into the slightly lighter, slightly more vibrant ends. And then we're going to repeat that section. So whenever you're blending 2 colors together, and I almost didn't do it myself, a towel. Keep a towel, keep your hands as clean as possible. They are your instruments in this. And that is where you'll get issues. That's where you get transfers if there's color all over your hands. So we're going to take our next section. And again, hopefully I'm taking the right amount of hair because I'm coloring very unnaturally here. We're going to slant down. Going to section that away. And reminding us that we've sectioned away some natural hair here. We're going to repeat that again. So this is the section we're now going to color. We're going to take out just like a very fine weave, because remember, the idea with this is that we're just doing it to kind of create almost like sparkling different tonality throughout the hair. We're not trying to create ombre, we're not trying to create balayage, we're trying to create a color that looks actually multitonal, intentional. So we do not need a huge amount of hair. So I would say a medium-ish weave to a fine weave. Keep that gap really defined. It's super important when you're weaving to also consider the hair that you're dropping, because if we did just a fine weave, but we picked up loads of hair, that could end up looking more like a slice. And when we're blending our lightener into it, it could end up looking like a line. So we take that hair that we're going to leave natural. We're going to put it back here with the rest of our natural hair. And then we're going to take our section and apply our 744 and 643. I hope I keep getting the formula right. So again, we've got our melting point. If we are nervous, we might just push that product into the hair so that it encapsulates it a little bit more. We're going to get our more vibrant color, apply it at that melting point, work upwards to make sure that we're 100% covering all that hair there, because there's nothing worse. You can always see, and I've done it myself, I'm sure loads of people have, you can always see when somebody was nervous blending 2 colors together, and you can see that like the blend goes beautifully from the root to a certain point, and then there's like a gap, and then the other tone begins or the other color begins, and it's very hard to fix as well. Keep to go back in, color over it. It can cause loads of issues. So it's much better that you really saturate that area. God forbid, worst case, if you do pull the root color down too far, you won't. But if you do, that is a much easier fix than getting a hollow spot between two blends. That is a nightmare fuel fix. So again, saturating. I'm working down. I have my comb on the floor, which is not the best place for it. So we're going to take our final section. And throughout the whole head, I haven't done this. I've just done it. And you can kind of see, ironically, with the light darker, you can see the tones a lot better. But I just did that through these sections through the front. So this isn't something you have to do through the whole head. You can if you want. But it's something that's like a really nice add-on to a client just around the face. Because again, you're just adding that professionality into it. I always, whenever I was doing a lot more clients, of which I do very few now, but one of the questions I used to always say to them, and it wasn't that I was trying to intentionally upsell, it wasn't that I was trying to like rip them off or take their money, is if they asked me for a color that they could do themselves, I was like, I literally would say, why are you paying me for this? Because you could do that at home. There's no point. And a lot of times clients don't realize, a lot of times if clients are like just an all over base 5 or base 6 or whatever, if they've been used to that their whole life, they don't know that there is other things that can be done with that. And I would say to them, yeah, it will cost more just this one time, and then we just tone it for the next couple of appointments. But when you show clients there's options within that and show them, give them, it might cost them a little bit more, but give them a professional looking color, that's when they'll go to you. That's why they'll stay going to you, and that's why they'll resist going over to box color. Although we shouldn't shame clients for box color either. I think that's a whole other topic. We should gently guide them away. So final section is this front piece. We're going to do the exact same thing, but what I would encourage this time though is be a little bit more strategic with those highlights. Well, they're not highlights, with those sections that we're going to lighten. Because if I just go and skim them from the top, what we'll end up with is actually potentially something that could be quite harsh sitting on top of a darker frame. And then when it's back, it might look a bit weird, might look a little bit more light than what we intended. It's like the difference really between, let's say, a blonde and a blonde is its internal lightness versus external lightness. So that's why sometimes you could add just one foil too many onto a brunette client, and if it's on the outside, they feel like an alien. I've done that many times. So whenever we're getting to kind of more of those visible areas, I would generally scoop my lighten sections from underneath. And again, being really considered with the way I'm weaving, but also making sure that we have those really clear, defined gaps. I would sometimes say your gaps in your weave are way more important, because when you think about it, if the gap is larger, I don't know if this is very cerebral, but if the gap is larger, that hair that we're taking away, like that's still part of the head. Like, so we often just think about the hair that we're scooping up and putting in foils, but the hair that we put aside, that still exists. It's still there. We need to think about it. And that hair that we're putting aside, that we're going to be darkening down, that's going to contribute to the overall look. And we want to make sure there's not more lightness than depth. So we want to make sure the gaps are bigger than the hair we're going to lighten. So we'll take that section. We're going to slide it back here with the other bits of natural hair that we left. We're going to maybe give her a little a little wipe on the forehead and apologize to her later. And then we're going to blend these colors down. So same thing. And this is for anything, if you're doing like a root shadow, root melt, blending two permanent colors together, whatever. Always give the root a little rub, a little pat, just to make sure it's really encapsulated. So you can see here when I'm pulling the hair down, it's not going to run down. We've worked that product in. If we just applied it fresh and did that, we would get a transfer to some degree. But if you're ever unsure, work it into the hair, pull it down so you'll get that gradient, you'll get that natural blend. So I'm going to brush down, and this is our final section that we're using, our 744. So work that up. We're going to try to take it away from her face. I promise I don't normally like blind clients with color. You can see how easy and beautifully this is just sitting onto the hair. So you can see there I didn't encapsulate it, so watch how much product runs to the end. Whereas if I had to work that in first, it wouldn't have transferred, but in this case we want it to transfer to the end. It's raining. You can probably hear that. Hopefully it's giving some beautiful calming ambient sound effects. Work that in. Brush through. And what I like to do to keep things neat is I'll take all my sections that I've just darkened, and usually I'll just twist them just to keep them out of the way, because what that means then is I can very easily access the woven sections we put aside. So this is all the hair that we're now going to apply our lightener to. So there are many benefits to doing this way. For one, you can visualize, I call it pre-weaving. So it's like you can visualize the hair you're sectioning out. So you can be like, okay, I can see how much hair I've taken out. You can kind of see how the overall effect is going to look. You can check that it's balanced. So if you did this through a whole head, for example, you could check and ensure that it was balanced before you were to even apply any lightener. The second benefit is that you can apply the lightener all in one go. So if we were to take it section by section, apply a little bit of lightener, move on to the next section, take our weave out, apply a little bit of lightener, it will be on this hair longer than it's on here. And if you apply that throughout a whole head, it is going to be on that hair at the back longer. We know this. Our intention here isn't to massively lighten this. Remember, we are just looking, just want to give my hands a little white before I touch the other side. We are just looking to break that base so that we can, I'm so sorry. Now, we are just looking to break that base so that, oh, the sun is coming out. We can see that different multi-tonality throughout the hair. Okay, so if we were to do it section by section, what would end up happening is we wouldn't just get this like soft, kind of subtle variation in tone. We would have some areas that were really light and some areas that hadn't lifted so much. So what I like to do is I'll section them off. Now, what I would conventionally do here is actually apply this at the end. So let's say about 10 minutes before the color was going to get rinsed, I'd come over and I would just apply it onto these lightened sections. So instead here, because we are not going to be doing that, what I've done is I've just mixed it with the 6 levels and I've just mixed it with 10 volume. So what I want to do first before I do that is just be conscious, how high up do I want my lightness to go? So I don't think I want it to go all the way up here. So I'm going to get a little bit of that length and end formula. And I'm just going to smudge it on to that melting point. I'm just going to work it into the hair a little bit to create a soft gradient. So you can see I've worked it in. So now when I pull the product down, it doesn't transfer, but we've got a nice soft gradient. And this is where I'm going to work my lightness into. A little trick with the lightness as well. So where your body positioning is everything, which is very difficult for me to say as I'm sitting to the left, well, what you can see is the left of the doll's head. But if I was to stand behind the client and I did this, what I'm going to get is actually lightness into dark, because again, this hair will have to travel further than this hair. So I would normally stand in front of the client and pull slightly forward and then apply the product at the bottom and work up. So I have my 6 levels here. What's really nice about this product as well is how lovely the hair feels after it. If anybody hasn't used it yet, you're missing out. If you have used it, you do know this. So I'm mixing it together with my 10 volume. Hopefully there's some like ASMR vibes. I've only recently gotten into ASMR for years. I thought everybody was making it up. And then randomly I saw a video of somebody mixing color and I was like, I get it. So I'm going to take those sections that we left out, starting from the bottom. Again, I'm blending backwards in a camera that is reversed. So forgive me if this doesn't look like the neatest application. But for the most part, I'm just trying to get the product onto the hair. Would this be suitable if I was trying to achieve a super cool, super bright lift? Definitely not. Because the idea here is that we're just breaking the base and we're also working with a copper. So we're not intentionally trying to create any kind of beige fantasy here. We're trying to think about it this way. You know, if you have a client that has old highlights and you do a copper tint all over their hair, you're going to get the copper on their natural hair, and then where it goes over the highlights, it looks totally different. We're trying to intentionally create that. but just subtle. So I'm allowing it, and I am working it up into that melting point because, again, I don't want any hollow spots. You work it in, and you could either sit that on a foil, or if you like to live life on the edge like I do, I would just twist that off to another side and keep it separate. So let me just show you. You can see there, hopefully, this is all my copper that I've done. So just a quick recap: 534, 643, melted down to 744, 643. We wove out some sections, put them to one side, and then we took them apart afterwards when the rest of our tint was applied, and we used our 6 levels with 10 volume to lighten. You can see because of my body positioning, it gets lighter towards the face. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to leave that on for about 10 minutes. And then we are going to rinse and emulsify. There's one really, really, really important step. I'm actually going to take these off now because I don't need them now. There's one really important step, though, that you need to make sure you're doing. The sun, every time the sun shines, I have this like phone holder, and the sun shines in the glass and melts it. So I've been slowly watching it like go like that. So hopefully that's not too distracting. But one really important step that we want to do here is make sure that, because we are emulsifying, you want to make sure that the porosity of the hair is evened out. So I know, like, conventionally back in the day, I don't know if there's any like Irish people watching it, we used to call it tint and floods, which was essentially like you would put like a tint on someone's hair, and then you would do like 5 highlights or whatever, and you would rinse and you would just emulsify the tint together, and then you would just hope that it would tone. And for the most part it did, but the problem with that is that the hair has just been freshly lightened. You're emulsifying essentially over what probably still has pre-liner in the hair, so it doesn't really always have a time for the tint to take properly. If it does, it might end up like washing off pretty quick, or you could end up actually rinsing some pre-liner into the surrounding tinted areas and causing some like orangey. You very rarely got issues, but you can get a way better result by being very conscious about how you rinse the hair and even out the porosity. So what I would do, this is, you're going to have to use your imagination for this because I have no basin to take you to, but what I would do with this client now is I would bring her after the 10 minutes, and because we beautifully sectioned out everything already, so I'm like, there's my tinted section, there's my lighted sections, I would rinse off all the lightened sections. I would do I'd even just put the teeniest, weeniest little bit of shampoo on my fingers, pull it all off, and then I would go in and use the porosity equalizer. So if you haven't used the porosity equalizer before, it is one of the best toning tools ever, especially, you know, for blondes that might be a bit more sensitized around the hairline, for blondes, for blondes that might be a little bit more sensitized on the ends, or even for brunettes that like potentially, new word, potentially their certain areas are a little bit dry, so when you put their all over end color on, or you refresh around certain bits, grab a bit darker dull, this is magic for that. But it's also great for this, because what you're going to do is you're going to rinse off your pre-lightener, give it that light shampoo, spray a little bit of porosity equalizer, and then you're going to wet down the remaining color. What I would often do is the remaining bowl that has the 743, I might add a little bit more 744 and 643. I might add a little bit more of that 744 in neat, mix it all together with a little bit of water, and I'd emulsify the all over thing in with these highlights. And what you're going to get then, I'm going to leave that for about 10 minutes. Because the cuticle is already open on this, because you've lightened it, it's not going to need the full development that the lengths and the ends of the rest of the hair did, but it's going to take really even, and it's going to take that maybe 1 shade, 2 shades lighter that we can see on the other side of the head. And there's your deposited tone in one step. So quick recap, and then I'll talk to you a little bit what I did for styling. So we did, on the roots, you have your 5, please let me get this correct. We've got our 534 and our 643. In order to get, this is the after result. And we'll see, hopefully we might get a little bit of, if we're lucky, we might get some sunlight to, oh, it did work, to show off that multi-tonality. So on the roots, it's a little bit darker. As I said, I prefer with kind of coppers or vibrant colors, because if you actually see, it doesn't, even though she's not a real human, you can see it doesn't look wildly different down here, but having that slightly deeper root up here, it doesn't really take away from the vibrancy or the kind of brightness of the overall look, but it does soften it out. It does grow better. And again, it's that one step closer to that professional result versus if they're doing it themselves at home. So we add in a little bit more of a brownie copper, which is our 534, in with our 643 to naturalize that root really slightly. We then took sections, blended our 643 and 744 into our root color. So the common theme between both of them is our 643. Up here, we add our 534 to make it a bit more natural. Down here, we add our 744 to make it a small bit more vibrant. And again, the reason you get a bit more of that kind of almost slightly reddy coppery is because you're doing it on a base 6 or 7. As we're bringing our 744 and 643 to, we weave out sections of hair and we leave them all to one side. When our tint is fully brought through, we pick those sections back up, bring it to where you can see that's already lightening there, and that's just with the 6 levels. Bring it all forward, and we're going to apply our 6 levels of lightness onto it. We're then going to rinse, do a little, like picking out these lighter pieces, give them a little rinse at the base, and it sounds like loads of effort and hassle. It's really not. It takes a couple of seconds. Spray our porosity spray, and then emulsify everything together, maybe adding a bit more 744 into the bowl if we need to, or if we need to kick up that vibrancy a small bit, and leave that for about 10 minutes. Then just for styling, to give you a little bit of context. So for me, I think one of my favorite out of the range is in terms of shampoo, after doing a color, I just think the Gentle Clean is really, really nice because I think it's really lovely on the scalp. I also think that they're all pretty color safe anyway, but Gentle Clean is just that extra step. It's only really taking out what needs to be taken out of the hair. I'll probably do 2 shampoos just to make sure there's no color left in, but the color does come out very, very easily. I'm going to do one of them. I'm going to use probably the Miracle Conditioner or the Miracle Mask. I remember we tried these when they first came out in Melbourne. They'd like replaced all of our shower conditioner and shampoo dispensers with them, and it is beautiful. It feels like literally silk in the hair. And that would be the same thing that I'd recommend to the client going forward. I think just in terms of like any kind of color, especially vibrant colors like coppers, reds, you just want that shine. It's the shine that's the difference that they walk out the salon with. So for styling then, I went in with I just saturated the hair in the Ion Body Foam. So whenever I'm teaching clients about this, I'm like, use loads, blast dry your hair, be prepared for your hair to feel a little bit weird, and then use your heat tool. And that's when it goes very soft again. And I kind of stress to them, if the hair doesn't feel a little bit tacky when you first blast dry it in, you haven't put enough in. And that's what you need for it to really work. If you've got any clients that have ever said, my hair doesn't hold a curl, or if you're saying my hair doesn't hold a curl, I essentially just did take a section. I can show you with the wand off, because I am conscious there's color on the other side of the hair. This is the 11 wand. And all that I do is I take a conventional like S-wave, but I make sure, so if you think about it this way, a conventional S-wave is you're taking, and this is off now, so I can like hold it for a couple of seconds. Also a good trick, if you've got a client who has no idea how to curl their hair, show them, and then be like, please practice with your hair off. Do not practice with your hair on, or with your hair off. If they have a wig, I guess that work, but with the heat tool off, because you don't want your client coming back into them and they've melted their whole hair and face. So conventional kind of beach wave is we wrap it around and we twist. If you want to take that to something that's a little bit bigger or a little bit more defined, that actually, I swear it's off. You just want to really accentuate that twist. So what I like to do is just work the whole way up and I just keep twisting. So it's almost like you're creating a sort of like rope. And what you'll get is, you know, like kind of, I can't never say her name, Chapel Rowan. Anyway, we love her. But that kind of almost slightly tighter type of wave that when you brush it out, it almost looks a bit more like a natural curl. So same as your classic beach wave, you're just really leaning into that twist. You want to create almost like a rope-like structure. So you should find yourself like, this should be flying around the place basically. And then to kind of set it all out, I would use like a detangler. In this case, I'm using a comb because it's the closest thing towards me. And then I use the Flex Hold Hairspray. This is one of my favorite products as well. It's the one that I always forget every time it runs out to order more. And every time I reach for it, I'm like, damn it. But it has that really beautiful, like, I actually think it has quite a strong hold. But what makes it flex is that you can just brush it out super easily. Like, it's enough of a hold, I think. Sometimes when you have like a Flex Hold Hairspray, you're a bit like, oh, what's the point? Whereas this actually has a lot of hold, I think. but it's very workable. It's very movable. It allows you to do a lot more stuff. Or if you spray and you're like, oh, well, I kind of messed that up, it's very kind of easy to correct. So that is my tutorial in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions or anything they want to pop in, by all means, please do. If I don't get a chance, I know this might be like a couple of minutes delay as well between the comments and stuff, but I'll probably bounce back and forth. I might even set up a little YouTube account, because if I can't answer your questions, the team at 11 Australia will. So make sure you follow this YouTube page. That's super important as well. And be sure to tag 11 Australia in all your social media. If you're not following their social media pages, please check them out as well. And then my name also is Conor. Sorry, I'm flying through the names as well. Poor Louise is probably like trying to get them up in the teleprompter there as quick as possible. My name is Conor James Doyle. There's my handle, Conor JMD. And thank you so much for joining me today. Have a quick look through the questions. None that I can see. Chelsea, I feel like this technique would look amazing on you. Have a little colour implant going right from dark root to baby light. Never thought about that. These aren't even questions. These are just me bigging up my own ego. I'm like, awesome. Yeah, of course. Sounds great. Sounds great. The porosity spray. Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Melvin, as well. Okay, cool. Thanks for joining me, guys. And be sure if you have any questions, drop in the comments. Like, subscribe. That's what we say on YouTube, right? And then check out 11 Australia Pro over on the other social medias. Bye, guys.
The luxury of self-destruction to be self-aware. Why my mind malfunctions into this reverse? Smile, I walk to get a drink from the machine. Why my mind malfunctions? The luxury of self